Welcome to Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and this is the 2022 Polestar 2. This is not the first time we've driven a Polestar 2 on this channel, but based on the one we drove, I talked to Polestar again and said, hey, can we actually have a very different version compared to what we drove in 2021. Now, the cars have not really changed physically, although Polestar has added some features and made some tweaks based on over-the-air software updates. So a lot of what we're talking about will apply to both the 2021 model year, this current 2022, and probably even the 2023s, because the biggest thing that I didn't like about the 2021 Polestar 2 that I drove was its suspension. The one we drove last year was a dual motor long range with every conceivable option added to it. That's typically how every automaker specs their cars for review by people like us. And what that meant was the car had the performance package, which in general I really like on pretty much anything, right? Because we're all enthusiasts. We want the sportiest, the fastest, the best handling, the quickest stopping. All of that sort of stuff is what we want. In this case though, I thought the Öhlins adjustable suspension was way too harsh in however it was set on my particular test car, and it was a complete pain to adjust. You have to crawl under the car with the wheels turned like this to twist the knobs at the bottom of the shock absorbers to change how stiff or soft they are, and to adjust the ones at the rear of the car, you actually have to jack the car up. That is not an experience I thought was befitting of a car that cost, in that case, about $64,000, $65,000. So I said, hey, Polestar, can you send me another version of your car to test out that doesn't have those expensive, fancy, slightly pain in the butt adjustable dampers? And of course they obliged. So this 2022 Polestar 2 is about as base as you can get, and that actually excites me because a lot of the time people are buying the more basic levels of the cars versus what we're being sent to test. So this Polestar 2 is, like I said, a fairly basic model. This is a single motor car, not a dual motor. It is a long range, that's how they're selling them. So what does that mean to you? Well, a single motor Polestar 2 is front wheel drive. It's kind of interesting when you have an EV that's front wheel drive. It's just what Polestar has chosen to do. But it is front wheel drive, so you only have one motor on that front axle. It makes 231 horsepower and 247 pound-feet of torque. And that is paired to a battery pack that can go for an estimated 270 miles on one single charge. Now, the interesting thing here, and I believe this only applied to the dual motor, but speaking of those over-the-air software updates, Polestar was actually able to change how the cars managed their power and actually give the dual motor owners a little bit extra range. So even if you owned a 2021, you got a little bit extra range, and I believe that went out a few months ago. The other thing that Polestar has been able to do with over-the-air software updates for, again, all the new cars and the cars made last year was add Apple CarPlay. So you've got a beautiful Google-based infotainment system in these cars, but if you really love Apple CarPlay as an iPhone user, you can now have Apple CarPlay in your Polestar. So nice to have it. It is a wired-only setup that uses USB-C. Those are the only USB ports in the car, but it is there for taking. Now, as with any electric car, people are always concerned not only about the mileage, but how fast can it charge, how quickly can it charge, and give me back to 80%, which is kind of the typical day-to-day maximum range. Now, Polestar says these cars can charge up to 155 kilowatts of charging speed. That's how fast they can take in juice. And they say that that is good for 10% to 80% charge in about 35 minutes. Now, I was able to actually get more than 155 kilowatts of charging speed out of the dual motor car. We're going to talk all about this 2022 Polestar 2, but the biggest question I want to answer during this video is if this car rides better in day-to-day scenarios compared to the cars with the performance package and those fancy Öhlins dampers. All right, so let's talk about driving the 2022 Polestar 2 long-range single motor without performance package. Like I mentioned, the last one I drove had those fancy Öhlins shocks. You can tell that a car has a performance package on it by the seat belts. They'll be kind of a gold color, and the brake calipers will be a matching gold. Those are your two easiest giveaways. So this car, of course, gray seat belts, does not have the performance pack. And this is, from what I can tell, a fairly base model. The window sticker in the glove box says this has the Pilot and Plus packages, which it doesn't actually have, because Plus would mean it would have a sunroof, and it doesn't have that. So whatever it's got, I'm pretty sure this is like the most basic you can buy, which means it's like a $47,000 example, and then you get the federal tax credit of $7,500 as your maximum. So price-wise, this is far, far less expensive compared to the one I drove last year. I think it's just as impressive, though. I like how it drives. This one, being front-wheel drive, has the most adorable little bit of torque steer if you floor it away from a stoplight. Beyond that, it doesn't really torque steer. It only makes 241 pound-feet of torque, 247 pound-feet of torque, 231 horsepower. Sorry, got my numbers mixed up there. But, you know, it's not so much power and torque as to be, you know, gut rearranging. That's how the dual motor Polestar 2 feels. It's very much in line with a Tesla Model 3 performance. And, you know, that is fun. It is theatrical. Is it something that you need day to day? No. If you're okay with this being front-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive, which I think for most people is honestly okay if you're just buying this to be a car, this is plenty powerful, plenty torquey. You know, the fact that it's an electric motor, so you've got all your torque available from a stop, really makes it feel more punchy than the numbers might indicate. Polestar quotes a 0 to 60 time of 7 seconds for this car, which, you know, I say a lot how 0 to 60 is not the end-all be-all of performance stats, but it is still helpful as a relative number, and this still feels like it's got some pep to it, whether you're leaving a stoplight or whether you're, you know, pulling out to pass someone. It's not like it falls on its face even at highway speeds. And then slowing down here for this red light, I'm not using the brake pedal at all. Polestar offers several levels of regenerative braking, and easy to set in the car when you go in here. It's got one pedal drive. You can have it completely turned off. You can have it on low, where it doesn't regen quite as much, or standard, which is the most regen assistance. I love one pedal driving in every EV. This one is pretty easy to adapt to. It's not crazy hard to figure out as far as, you know, adapting to the pedal response and, you know, treating it as kind of a rheostat for how much your foot is on or off the skinny pedal, the throttle pedal. It's not really a throttle, I guess, but you figure out how much you need to go versus stop, and it's really fun to play the game of how little can I touch the brakes. You've also got adjustable steering feel as far as how much weight there is in the steering. I don't think there's a ton of steering feel. I think it's enough. The weight of the steering is nice enough even in the standard mode, but, you know, a sports car, this is not. It's not vague, it's just not, you know, it's kind of dead, but that's okay. You know, for the type of car this is, this one in particular, being a non-performance pack car, is meant to just be a car. It handles well, it will take an off-ramp well. I know we're just on a straight road, but it will handle an off-ramp fairly well just by virtue of having the batteries in the floor and having a lot of weight down low. So you can take a turn well enough. As far as what the front end is doing and how much it talks to you, you know, that's kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say hit or miss, but it's just fine. It's not bad, but it's not exceptional sports car steering either. And then, of course, the big thing that I mentioned that was such a point of contention for me driving anywhere that wasn't a perfect road with the performance car was the ride quality. I thought it was, you know, really stiff with however the Öhlins were set on that particular car. I think even when you turn them down to full soft, they can still be kind of stiff. That's what I've heard from some other owners. And in this case, with the non-performance suspension, the ride quality is exactly how I would prefer it, which is to say it's not too soft. It's not like it's wallowy or, you know, all over the place. The body control is still really good, but the compression and the rebound are both far more what I would believe to be appropriate for a car like this. It doesn't really get upset by bumps. For those of you who know Washington, D.C., I took it into Georgetown the other night and drove down some cobblestone streets, which was kind of a purposeful test compared to what the old car was doing, even on just mild, you know, mildly mistreated roads. It just had a little bit of, you know, potholes and things going on. This can handle a cobblestone road pretty nicely. So much better controlled, much better balanced for me. If it were up to me, I would pick one of these without the performance package because I so like how this drives better than the performance car that I drove last year. The other big thing that Polestar just pushed out for an update, it's not something that you only get on a 2022. If you have a 2021, you have it as well now, but they added Apple CarPlay to the infotainment system. I really like the basic infotainment setup in here. The entire operating system runs on Google. It's not Android Auto. It's its own setup that runs for the sake of, you know, having your gauge cluster functional even if the whole system crashes. It's a special system, but you've got Google Maps built into the gauge cluster and into the main screen, and then the main screen can also control, you know, your music, and you can download different apps for streaming audio and things. They added CarPlay, and it has to be hooked up over USB-C, which is fine. The ports are right here. But what I don't love about it, it just kind of takes over the whole system. And if you really, really, really want CarPlay for whatever reason, then okay, fine. But the Google Assistant can read your text messages to you, and you can reply via voice, kind of like CarPlay. The maps on the built-in system are beautiful. They go in the cluster here, which you get nothing if you use CarPlay. It's just your speedometer and your state of charge. That's all it shows you. It's not as well integrated with the car as I would hope, whereas using the built-in Google Maps will show you, you know, okay, at your destination, if I look at this, where I'm going now, it shows I'm going to arrive at my destination with 48% state of charge, and then if I turn back and go to where I started, I will arrive at, you know, with 21% remaining, or whatever the numbers are. So it's really tightly integrated. If you need to find a charger, it will help you do that. That's something that, you know, Apple Maps and Google Maps via CarPlay don't really do very well still. So I know some people love CarPlay. It is a great thing to have to overlay on a terrible infotainment system that is too difficult to use or whatever. The Polestar setup is fantastic. It is beautiful. It is easy to use. It is snappy. I really, you know, this car has CarPlay and I just don't want to use it. I used it for about 15 minutes and that was all I cared to try because the regular setup is just so well done. As we get up to highway speed here, you know, I think the ride, again, out of the city on the highway is nice and solid, really comfortable and exactly what I would want compared to the other car that I just thought was harsh, even on highways. It just, the whole thing was a little much for me. And then as far as, you know, road noise and things, it's a little noisy in here. Nothing too crazy. I'm getting more tire noise than wind noise, but nothing too wild. Again, for the price of the car, it's about what I expect. Certain materials in here are also a little on the non-luxe side of things, which again, for a $40-something thousand car is more what I expect. You know, certain pieces of the console and everything are just a little bit thin plastic, which I hate complaining about that stuff, but despite it being sort of thin plastics in places and a little bit of wind noise and whatever, the Polestar 2 makes a good first impression. I think it feels well screwed together. A lot of people have asked me, you know, oh, these things are built in China. How well do they feel assembled? How durable are they? The people I know who have them, I've polled some owners, they seem to be fairly happy with their cars, fairly impressed with their cars, both from an experience perspective and a build quality perspective. This one's no exception. It only has, you know, 1,000 miles on it, so hard to say how this one is compared to one that's got, you know, 10, 20,000 miles on it, but seem to be pretty good. Generally, very, very impressive in here. Do I wish the color palette was less dour? Yeah. They do offer an all-black seating option if you pick these cloth seats. They do offer a real leather that's a much lighter, kind of like light stone color. All of their paint colors are generally pretty bland, pretty basic. I really think these cars would look great in some more punchy colors, but they're just not doing it, which is really unfortunate. But other than that, I love the interior layout. I really like the ride of this one. I think the overall driving experience is great. I think the user interface, the software that this car runs on is great. It's really, you know, it's a car I have very, very few criticisms or complaints over. All right, and that is it for this review of the 2022 Polestar 2. Thank you so much for coming along. As always, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe right here on YouTube. If you'd like, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. And if you'd like to join join both an online and in-person community of fellow LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, head over to outmotorsports.com. We have a whole group over there, and we would love to get to know you both online and at one of our events in person. As always, thank you so much for coming along. Please stay safe, be well, and we'll see you again soon.